The first thing I heard was the sound of engines, dozens of them, crawling up the hill like a rising storm. At first, I thought it was thunder again, but then the headlights cut through my window blinds, slicing the darkness into trembling strips of light. My phone had no signal. The power was out. The night was supposed to be quiet. It was never supposed to feel like this. Outside, shadows moved, men in dark coats, boots crunching against gravel. I could hear the synchronized rhythm of radios crackling, short bursts of coded words I couldn't understand. Every instinct told me to hide, but curiosity anchored me to the window. That's when I saw the symbol on one of the cars, a gold lion etched into black steel. My heart stopped. I'd seen that same lion before on the ring I'd found beside the man I'd saved. The rain had started again, slow at first, tapping against the glass like hesitant knocks. Then came the flash of lightning, and for a second, I saw all of them, at least 200 men surrounding my house. Every exit was covered. My little countryside home, the one I'd bought to escape the chaos of a city, was now the center of something terrifying and incomprehensible. One of them stepped forward. His silhouette was broad, unmoving, disciplined. The others deferred to him instinctively. He spoke into his radio and pointed toward my door. My knees trembled. I took a step back, clutching the edge of the counter where I used to keep my tea mugs and medical supplies. My mind was spinning. I hadn't done anything wrong. I wasn't part of anything. Then my landline, an old relic I barely ever used, rang once. Just once. The sound sliced through the silence like a warning shot. I froze, staring at it as if it might explode. I picked up the receiver with shaking hands. A man's voice came through, low, steady, familiar. "Don't open the door," he said. "You're safe. I owe you my life." The line went dead. My body went numb. I stumbled toward the window again, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The man outside, the one giving orders, stepped into the porch light. For a moment, his face appeared, and the world around me seemed to fade into silence. It was him, the stranger I'd found bleeding in the rain 2 nights ago, the man whose wound I had stitched, whose hand I'd held as he fought for breath. I'd thought he was gone forever, or dead, but he was very much alive, and now his entire army was at my door. I didn't know it then, but that night, the night I chose to help a dying man without asking who he was, had already rewritten my entire life. Everything that followed was because of that one act of kindness. Clapperboard, welcome to Hidden Mafia Stories, where every act of mercy comes with a price. Would you have opened your door that night, or left a wounded stranger to fate? Thought Balloon, comment your answer below. And don't forget to subscribe for more real, untold stories of loyalty, danger, and fate. Because sometimes the most ordinary people step into the darkest worlds without even knowing it. The night it all began, the rain was so heavy it blurred the edges of the world. Trees swayed like shadows trying to break free, and thunder rolled through the mountains, shaking the window panes of my small countryside clinic. Nights like that usually meant quiet. No travelers, no emergencies, no reason to stay awake past midnight. But something about that storm felt different. It carried a weight, a strange electricity that made my skin prickle. I was just finishing my last cup of coffee when I heard it, a crash outside. Metal against metal, followed by the dull thud of something hitting the ground. I froze, my heartbeat loud enough to drown out the storm. At first, I thought it was an animal, a deer, maybe frightened by lightning. But then came the sound that changed everything. A low, human groan. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the rain. The cold bit through my sweater as I scanned the dark. The beam of light landed on a car, its front end buried in the ditch beside the road. Steam hissed from the hood. The driver's door hung open. My breath caught when I saw him. A man slumped beside the car, his hand pressed weakly against his abdomen, blood mixing with the rainwater that streamed down the gravel. "Sir!" I shouted, my voice swallowed by thunder. No answer. I ran to him, kneeling in the mud. His clothes were black, not just dark from the storm, but tailored, expensive, soaked through and clinging to muscle. I pushed his hand away gently and saw the wound, a clean gunshot low on the left side. The bleeding was bad, but not fatal yet. He looked up at me then, and for a second I wished he hadn't. His eyes were cold, sharp, like glass cutting through the dark. "You need to stay still," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm a nurse. I can help." He didn't answer. He just stared at me as if trying to decide something. Then he gave a short nod, one of command, not gratitude. I half-carried, half-dragged him into my clinic, water pooling on the floor as I kicked the door shut behind us. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I laid him on the examination table, cutting through his soaked shirt. The bullet had passed clean through. I sterilized my instruments, my hands moving faster than my mind could process. "Who did this to you?" I asked, trying to distract him as I worked. He let out a low breath that might have been a laugh. "Doesn't matter," he murmured. His voice was deep, steady, even as pain twisted through his body. "Just do what you have to do." The bullet wound wasn't the only mark. His body was covered in bruises and faint scars, not from accidents, but from years of violence. I'd seen soldiers like him before, men whose lives were measured in battles, not birthdays. But there was something different about him. Too composed, too calculating, even now. When I started stitching, he watched me the entire time. Not flinching, not blinking, just observing. I tried to focus on the wound, on the rhythm of the needle, but every time his eyes caught mine, I felt a strange pull, fear and curiosity tangled together. After an hour, the bleeding stopped. He sat up, refusing to rest. "You should lie down," I said. "You lost a lot of blood." He shook his head. "No hospitals, no police, no questions." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, pressing it into my hand. "If anyone comes asking about me, say nothing. Understand?" I looked at the paper but didn't open it. "You're not making sense. You could die." He gave me a faint smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been dying for years." Before I could say more, he stood. The strength in his movements was impossible for a man who'd just been shot. He found his coat, slipped it on, and moved toward the door. I tried to stop him. "Wait, at least tell me your name." He hesitated, hand on the door frame. Rain spilled in around him, lightning flashing behind his silhouette. When he finally spoke, it was quiet but sharp enough to stay with me for the rest of my life. "You don't want to know my name." Then he was gone. The sound of his footsteps faded into the storm until there was nothing but rain and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I stood there for a long time, staring at the blood on the floor, the smell of antiseptic hanging in the air. The note in my hand was damp now, the ink smudging. Against my better judgment, I unfolded it. It was blank, except for one symbol. A golden lion, drawn with swift, confident strokes. That same night, I dreamed of engines in the distance, of headlights crawling up the hill. I woke up sweating, heart pounding, but when I looked out the window, the world was still. For now, the morning after he vanished, the world outside my window felt eerily calm, too calm, as if the storm had taken the noise but left the unease behind. The air still smelled of rain and iron, and somewhere near the ditch, the faint outline of his tire tracks sank deeper into the mud. I half convinced myself I'd imagined it all, that the man, the blood, the golden lion, had been some strange, feverish dream. But when I walked into the clinic, I saw the proof. The chair he'd used was still tipped slightly to the side. The towel I'd wrapped around his shoulder lay on the floor, stiff with dried blood. On the counter, where I'd set the needle tray, something gleamed a ring. I froze. It was gold, heavy, engraved with the same lion emblem I'd seen on the note. Only this time, the lion's eyes were made of tiny red stones that caught the morning light. When I picked it up, a cold chill ran through me. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a mark, something belonging to a world that didn't forgive curiosity. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? A man I don't know, possibly a criminal, crashed outside my clinic and left a symbol of organized murder as a thank you? No. That kind of confession could destroy my life faster than the bullet that almost took his. Instead, I cleaned up every trace of that night, mopped the floor, sterilized the instruments, burned the blood-soaked towel in the fireplace until the smoke filled the room with a sour, metallic scent. When it was done, I sat by the window and watched the rain turn to mist over the fields. That's when I noticed it, a black sedan parked at the end of the road. At first, I thought it was just a lost traveler. But hours passed, and the car didn't move. The windows were tinted, impossible to see inside. I told myself not to panic, that I was being paranoid, but something deep in my gut said otherwise. By late afternoon, the car was gone, but the silence it left behind was worse. That night, I tried to sleep, but every sound felt amplified. A branch tapping the window, the hum of the refrigerator, even my own breathing sounded suspicious. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went to the window again. Moonlight spilled over the yard, faint but clear enough to see a small shape on my porch. An envelope. I opened the door slowly, half expecting someone to lunge out of the shadows. Nothing. Just the envelope, weighed down by a single bullet casing inside. My hands trembled as I unfolded the note. He remembers. No signature. No explanation. I locked the doors and drew every curtain in the house. Sleep never came. The next day, I tried to distract myself with work. My clinic usually served the nearby farming community, so people knew me, or thought they did. But now, every conversation felt like an interrogation. When Mrs. Warren brought her grandson for a checkup, she asked, "Everything all right, dear? You look pale." I smiled and lied, just tired. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on me longer than usual. I wondered if she'd seen the car. If everyone had. By evening, the same black sedan returned. Only this time, it didn't park at a distance. It rolled right up my driveway. I stepped back from the window as two men got out. Tall, sharp suits, the kind you only see in cities where money and violence share the same table. They didn't knock. They simply stood by the door, one of them adjusting his cufflinks, the other scanning the property like a soldier. Finally, the taller one tapped the door twice, not a knock, but a command. When I opened it, his gaze pinned me in place. "Elena Rossi?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded, satisfied. "You treated someone 2 nights ago. Male. Late 30s. Bullet wound." I didn't answer. "You're not in trouble," he said smoothly, though his tone made it sound like a lie. "But you need to understand something. The man you helped, he's not just anyone." My throat tightened. "Who is he?" He smiled faintly, but his eyes stayed cold. "You helped the wrong man." Before I could ask anything else, they turned and walked away. The sedan's tires hissed against the wet gravel, disappearing into the fog. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the empty road. My reflection in the glass door looked like someone else, a stranger caught in someone else's story. That night, I couldn't bring myself to turn off the lights. I sat at the kitchen table with the gold ring and the note beside me, tracing the lines outline again and again with my thumb. Who was he? A criminal? A killer? A man running from something worse? And why, of all people, had he come to me? Sometime before dawn, exhaustion finally pulled me under. In my dream, I was back in the storm, only this time I wasn't the one helping him. I was the one bleeding, reaching for a stranger's hand. When I woke, sunlight had already filled the room, and on the table where I'd left the ring, there was something new. A small velvet box. I hadn't heard a door, a step, or a car. Just the faint smell of cigarette smoke hanging in the air. Inside the box was a folded note and a key. The note said, "For when they come." I didn't know it yet, but they were already on their way. By the time morning came, I convinced myself the night before had been some kind of test, a warning, maybe, but nothing more. I tried to act normal, brewed coffee, fed the stray cat that came by every morning, and sat by the window pretending I wasn't waiting for another black car. It didn't take long. At exactly 9 o'clock, tires crunched over the gravel outside. Not one car this time, 3. They stopped in perfect formation, engines humming but never shutting off. The kind of cars that cost more than my clinic. The kind of engines that didn't travel alone. I stood frozen behind the curtain, heart pounding. Men stepped out, not in uniforms, in suits, crisp and dark, their expressions carved from stone. One of them carried a small black briefcase. Another scanned the area, speaking quietly into a mic hidden near his collar. Everything about them screamed control. A knock echoed, sharp, polite, deadly. I didn't move. Maybe if I stayed quiet, they'd leave. But they didn't. The second knock was slower, harder, almost mocking. Then a voice, low and firm. "Miss Rossi, we know you're home." I closed my eyes, every instinct screaming to run. But where? The woods behind my house led to nowhere but miles of trees and mud. My only choice was to face whatever stood on the other side of that door. When I opened it, 3 men filled the doorway like a wall. The one in the center was older, silver hair, a scar near his temple, and eyes that didn't blink. The kind of man who could smile while ordering your death. "Elena Rossi?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm Angelo," he said, his tone almost courteous. Mr. DeLuca asked me to extend his gratitude. The name hit like a punch. "DeLuca!" He nodded once. "You saved his life. That makes you important. And being important in his world is not always a good thing." I stepped back. I don't want to be part of any world. I did what anyone would do. I helped a man who was hurt. Angelo smiled faintly. "Anyone?" "No. Most people would have walked away. Or called the police. You didn't. That tells us something about you." My pulse quickened. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing for now." He opened the briefcase and placed it on the table beside the door. Inside were stacks of cash, neat, crisp, clean. A gesture of appreciation. And a warning. "I don't want your money." "Then consider it insurance." His tone hardened. "Because you'll need it." Before I could reply, another man entered. Younger, silent, his jacket still damp from the rain. He placed a small black phone on the table. "Mr. DeLuca will call you soon," Angelo said. "Keep that line open. Don't use your regular number." I shook my head, panic rising. "You don't understand. I didn't ask for this. I just saved him," Angelo interrupted. "And in doing so, you changed your life. There's no undoing that, Miss Rossi." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "One more thing. If anyone else comes asking questions, police, reporters, anyone, tell them you were out of town. Understand?" I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. When they left, the silence felt heavier than their presence. I stood staring at the briefcase, the phone, the smell of their cologne still lingering in the air. Outside, the cars pulled away in synchronized motion, black dots fading into the horizon. For hours, I just sat there, numb. The money looked unreal, like it belonged in a movie. I wanted to throw it out the window, burn it, anything to erase the connection it symbolized. But part of me knew better, that denying him would only make things worse. By evening, I couldn't take the waiting anymore. I turned on the TV for noise. Every channel seemed louder than usual, filled with chaos and politics and noise that didn't belong to my world, until one headline caught my eye. Mafia power struggle in Southern Europe, DeLuca family at war. The screen showed images of black cars, crime scenes, and names I'd never heard but now felt too close. In one blurred shot, I saw a familiar outline, a man with the same posture, the same presence. Marco DeLuca, alive, smiling. The news anchor's voice was steady. Police sources believed DeLuca narrowly escaped an assassination attempt late Tuesday night. His condition remains unknown. I turned off the TV. My hand was shaking. Tuesday night, the night of a storm. That's when the black phone buzzed. Just once. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. The voice on the other end was calm, deep, unmistakable. "Elena!" I didn't need to ask who it was. "I told you not to open the door that night," he said softly. "But you did. You saved me." My throat went dry. Who are you, really? A pause. Then, someone you shouldn't have helped. Then why send your men here? Because they weren't here to threaten you, he said. They were here to make sure you stay alive. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. You're in danger now, Elena. You helped me, and my enemies know it. They'll come for you. But as long as you stay where you are, my men will keep you safe. Do you understand? I wanted to scream that I didn't want his help, that I just wanted my old life back, quiet, anonymous, safe. But the words wouldn't come. He sighed. You'll get used to the silence. It's the only kind of peace people like us ever find. People like us, I asked. People who made choices they can't take back. Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the lifeless phone, the rain starting again outside. Somewhere in the distance, an engine roared. I didn't bother to look. For the first time since that night, I understood I hadn't just saved a man. I'd entered a world that didn't let you leave, and it was already too late to run. By dawn, the world felt like it had stopped breathing. The sky hung low and gray, the air thick with that strange stillness that comes before chaos. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw headlights cutting through the mist, faceless men stepping from the shadows. I made coffee just to have something to do with my hands, but it tasted bitter, like metal. My clinic was empty, the phone line silent. The black phone sat on the counter, a small, menacing reminder that my life was no longer mine. At 7:46 a.m. I heard it, the rumble of engines, not one but many. I went to the window, my stomach dropping. Cars, dozens of them, black SUVs and motorcycles, crawling up the hill, their tires throwing mud and gravel into the air. By the time they reached my front gate, the count had passed 50, then 70, then hundreds. Men poured out, moving in formation, disciplined and silent. They surrounded the house like a dark tide, positioning themselves at every exit. They weren't shouting, weren't threatening, just waiting. It was too organized, too calm. I backed away from the window, pulse hammering in my ears. My hands trembled as I reached for the black phone. It buzzed before I could touch it. "Don't be afraid," the voice said. It was him. "Marco, what's happening?" I whispered. "Who are these people?" "My people," he said. "They're here for you. For me." My voice broke. "Marco, this is insane. I didn't do anything." "You did," he said softly. "You saved me. That makes you family." I pressed my hand to my forehead. "I don't want to be family. I want my life back." A pause. Then, quietly, "It's too late for that." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that gratitude shouldn't look like captivity. But outside, the sound of footsteps drew closer. The front gate opened, and a figure in a long coat walked toward my door. He wasn't rushing. He didn't have to. The others stepped aside for him like water parting for a ship. When he reached the porch, I recognized the way he moved, the same controlled power, the same wounded calm. He lifted his hand, and the men froze. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until he knocked. 3 times, firm, patient, certain. I opened the door slowly, and there he was, alive, clean-shaven, dressed in black. His wound was healing, the scar peeking just below his collar. He looked nothing like the broken man I'd stitched together. This version of him radiated something else: authority, danger, a quiet kind of royalty. "Good morning, Elena," he said, as if we were old friends meeting for coffee. "What is this?" I demanded. "Why are all these people here?" He looked over his shoulder briefly. "Protection." "From what?" He met my eyes. "From everyone who wants to use you to get to me." My mouth went dry. "You brought this to my doorstep." He nodded slowly. "I know, and I'll fix it. But until I do, you're under my protection. No one touches you. No one threatens you." I stared at him, fury and fear tangled inside me. "You're not protecting me, Marco. You're trapping me." His jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that? Do you think I want this?" I laughed bitterly. "You command 200 armed men, and I'm supposed to believe you're the victim?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked past me into the living room, glancing at the photo frames on the wall. My parents, my graduation, the life that existed before him. He touched nothing, just looked. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. "Someone who believed the world could still be good." I didn't reply. He turned toward the window, watching the rows of cars outside. "The people out there, they would burn cities for me. But not one of them would save me the way you did. You didn't even know my name." "Exactly," I said. "And if I had, I never would have opened that door." A faint smile ghosted across his lips. "That's why you did." The silence between us stretched until I couldn't bear it anymore. "What do you want from me, Marco?" He finally looked at me again, his expression unreadable. "I want you to live." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But if you ever hear a car stop outside when I'm not here, don't open the door. Don't speak to anyone. Don't even turn on the lights. Just call me." I stared at him, the reality of his world crashing down around me. "You talk like a man expecting war." He nodded once. "War is already here." Outside, one of his men shouted something in Italian. Marco moved to the window, his posture shifting instantly, alert, commanding. I followed his gaze and saw a convoy of unfamiliar vehicles pulling up at the bottom of the hill. Different cars, no markings. "Who are they?" I whispered. "Not mine." He turned to me, his voice low and urgent. "Get down!" Before I could react, the world erupted. Gunfire cracked across the valley. Windows shattered. Men dove behind cars, shouting orders, the smell of gunpowder mixing with rain and earth. I dropped to the floor, heart pounding. Marco crouched beside me, shielding me with his body as bullets tore through the walls. His voice was calm, steady, terrifyingly in control. "Stay with me, Elena. Don't move." Minutes felt like hours. The sounds of battle roared outside, engines revving, tires screeching, shouts swallowed by thunder. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Marco stood slowly, dust and plaster clinging to his coat. He looked out the window, breathing hard. Then he spoke into a small radio clipped to his wrist. "Clear the perimeter. Leave no trace." When he turned back to me, his eyes softened. "You see now, you can't go back to your old life. They know who you are." I sat on the floor, shaking. "What happens now?" He extended a hand. Now you trust me. I looked at it, that same hand I'd stitched, trembling from pain days ago, now steady and powerful. I didn't want to take it, but as the last echoes of gunfire faded into the mist, I realized something chilling. Whether I trusted him or not, I was already his responsibility. And in his world, debts were never forgotten, only paid in full. The morning after the gunfire, the valley was silent again, too silent. The rain had stopped, but the scent of smoke still lingered in the air. The ground outside my clinic was scarred with tire tracks, shell casings, and the faint shimmer of oil slicks catching the pale sunlight. Marco's men moved like ghosts, clearing debris, speaking in hushed Italian tones. None of them looked at me. I stood by the door, arms wrapped around myself, watching them work. The once peaceful hillside now looked like the aftermath of a war I never agreed to fight in. Marco was on his phone a few feet away, his voice calm but sharp, commanding without needing to raise it. When he hung up, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, part guilt, part resolve. It's done, he said. No one will come here again. I laughed bitterly. You said that yesterday. He didn't flinch. Yesterday, they didn't know whose life you saved. Now they do. He walked toward me, his steps deliberate, slow. You're under my protection, Elena. From this point on, that means something. What does that mean exactly? I asked. That I'm what? Part of your world now. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured for one of his men to bring something from the car. It was a small leather folder, heavy with papers. Marco placed it on the kitchen table like a lawyer presenting evidence. Inside, he said, are the documents transferring ownership of this property to me. My heart skipped. You can't do that. He raised an eyebrow. I already did. You'll still live here. You'll still work here. But from now on, your safety, your bills, your silence, all of it is my responsibility. I don't want your protection, I said through gritted teeth. And I don't need your money. Marco's gaze hardened. This isn't about money. You're alive because of me. You'll stay alive because of me. I opened my mouth to argue but stopped. There was something final in his tone. Not arrogance, not anger, but inevitability. A man who decided long ago that control was the only way to protect what mattered. I turned away, tried to steady my voice. You talk about protection like it's a favor, but it feels like a prison. He was quiet for a long time before answering. Every kind of safety is a cage, Elena. Some are just made of gold. When I looked back at him, he was watching me, really watching me, as if searching for the person who'd pulled him from the edge of death. You think I enjoy this? He asked quietly. Do you think I want you tangled in this life? If I could erase that night, I would. But the second you stitched my wound, you became a name whispered in the wrong rooms. I can't unmake that. I swallowed hard, my anger giving way to something closer to fear, not of him, but of the truth he carried. Who are you, really? I asked. He hesitated. Marco De Luca, head of the De Luca Syndicate. The words hung in the air like smoke. I'd heard the name before, everyone had. A man whose empire stretched across borders, built on shadows and loyalty. Some said he was ruthless, others said he was fair. But everyone agreed on one thing. No one crossed him and lived. So that's it, I said. I saved the devil himself. He gave a faint, humorless smile. The devil doesn't bleed, Elena. I did. Before I could respond, one of his men entered, the same one who'd brought the folder. He whispered something in Italian, his tone clipped and urgent. Marco nodded, face tightening. What is it? I asked. They found the one who ordered the hit, he said. He's in custody. I stepped back. Custody? You mean? I mean he's alive, Marco said sharply, cutting me off. For now. Marco, no, I said, my voice breaking. Don't do this. You can't keep killing people. He turned, his voice low, almost wounded. You think this is about revenge? They would have killed you next, Elena. They left a message on your gate this morning. My men erased it before you woke up. A chill ran through me. What did it say? He met my eyes. It said, the nurse dies next. For a moment, the room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to breathe. Marco stepped closer but stopped just short of touching me. Do you understand now? You don't get to walk away from this. Not yet. I wanted to hate him, to scream, but the fear was stronger. The truth was undeniable. The danger wasn't just his anymore, it was mine. By nightfall, the house was surrounded again. This time not for a firefight, but as a fortress. Armed men patrolled the perimeter, silent and disciplined. Black vehicles lined the road like sentinels. Inside, Marco remained near the window, one hand resting on his gun, the other on his phone. I sat by the fire, numb, staring at the flames. He spoke softly after a while, without looking at me. You remind me of my sister, he said. She was a nurse, too. She believed mercy could fix anything. What happened to her? I asked quietly. He exhaled, the sound heavy. She tried to leave the family. They made sure she never did. The crackle of the fire was the only sound for a while. Then Marco turned, his expression unreadable. I won't let that happen to you. I met his gaze, and in that moment, something in me broke, not from fear, but from the haunting realization that I was no longer a bystander in someone else's story. I was a name written in the same ink as his, blood and loyalty intertwined. And there was no escaping the debt I'd earned the night I saved him. The days that followed blurred into each other, a strange rhythm of fear and quiet luxury. My small clinic, once filled with the scent of disinfectant and chamomile tea, now smelled of leather, gun oil, and imported cigars. Marco's men came and went in silence, speaking in codes, guarding the windows, scanning every passing car. At night, I could hear them outside, their boots crunching on gravel, the faint click of safeties being checked. Every sound reminded me that peace no longer lived here. My home had become a fortress, and I was its prisoner. Marco visited every morning. He always looked calm, crisp suit, fresh shave, no trace of the man I dragged in from the storm. But sometimes, when the light hit his face just right, I caught the exhaustion hiding beneath the control. You're safe now, he said one morning as I sat by the window. Safe? I asked. There are rifles outside my door, Marco. That's not safety, that's surveillance. He leaned against the counter, studying me. You're alive. That's all that matters right now. Alive, I repeated quietly. That's not the same as living. He looked away, silent for a moment. You're not wrong, he said softly. But in my world, we take what we can get. The conversation ended there. It always did. That afternoon, a black envelope arrived. Marco opened it without a word, scanning its contents before burning it in the fireplace. The paper crackled, curling in the flames, and I caught one word before it turned to ash: witness. I frowned. What was that? Nothing you need to worry about. Marco. He turned to me sharply. Elena, trust me when I say ignorance is your best protection. The less you know, the longer you live. I hated that he was probably right. 2 days later, the police came. Not in force, just 2 detectives in gray suits with polite smiles and eyes that missed nothing. I saw them through the window before they even reached the porch. Marco's men vanished into the trees like ghosts. I opened the door before they could knock. Miss Rossi, the older detective asked, flashing his badge. We'd like to ask you a few questions about a recent incident. What incident? I asked, forcing a calm I didn't feel. He exchanged a glance with his partner. There was gunfire reported near this property 2 nights ago. Locals claim they heard explosions. I didn't hear anything. I lied. His gaze flicked past me into the house. May we come in? Before I could answer, Marco appeared at the end of the hallway, wearing the disarming smile of a man born to lie convincingly. Officers, he said warmly. Is there a problem? They stiffened. Recognition flickered behind their eyes. They knew who he was, even if they couldn't say it aloud. Just routine questions, mister. DeLuca, he said simply. The older officer's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Right. Well, if either of you hear or see anything suspicious, please contact the station. Marco nodded politely. Of course. When they left, the silence was suffocating. I turned to him, fury rising. You think this is normal? You think I can just keep lying for you? He didn't react, just poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared into the fire. Lying keeps you alive. Telling the truth gets you buried. I didn't sign up for this, I snapped. I saved your life. I didn't sell mine. He set the glass down slowly. You think kindness is free? That stopped me. The way he said it, not as a threat, but as a confession, made my anger crumble into something else. Every act of mercy has a price, he continued quietly. You pay it one way or another. Maybe with peace, maybe with freedom, maybe with your name. He looked up at me, and for the first time, his mask slipped. I've been paying for kindness my whole life, Elena. The only difference is I can afford it. I wanted to argue, but the weight of his words sank too deep. That night, I sat awake by the window, the black phone in my hand. The world outside glowed dimly under the moon, silent except for the occasional rustle of wind. Somewhere beyond the trees, a dog barked, then stopped abruptly. At 2:17 a.m., the phone buzzed once. A text. Unknown number. They're coming. Before I could even process the message, the front door burst open. Marco's men swarmed in, weapons drawn, shouting in Italian. Marco appeared seconds later, pulling me away from the window as headlights flashed across the yard. Who's coming? I shouted. He didn't answer. He was already giving orders. Move the cars. Get her downstairs. I tried to pull free, but he gripped my wrist. "Do not argue with me." We ran down to the cellar, his men sealing the entrance behind us. Above, I could hear engines, gunfire, the crack of glass breaking. Marco stood by the concrete wall, gun in hand, breathing slow and steady. I couldn't see his face in the dark, but his voice carried calm authority. "They found us sooner than I expected." "How?" I whispered. "There's always someone willing to sell loyalty," he said. "Even in my family." The sound above us grew distant, replaced by silence. Then came a single, muffled explosion. Dust rained from the ceiling. Marco's men shouted something, and then nothing. He pressed a hand to my shoulder. "Stay here." "No, Marco!" But he was already gone. Minutes passed like hours. I sat alone in the dark, the air thick with gunpowder and fear. Then the door creaked open again. He returned, alive, covered in soot, blood on his sleeve, but standing. "It's over," he said. "What happened?" He met my eyes. "They were after you." "Me?" He nodded. "They think you know where I'm hiding. They think you have leverage. You're not just the woman who saved me anymore. You're the weakness they can use." I felt my stomach twist. "What does that mean for me?" "It means," he said quietly, "that the price of your kindness has just gone up." He turned away, and in that moment, I realized something terrible. Marco didn't just want to protect me anymore. He needed to. And people like him never let go of what they need. By the next morning, the smoke had cleared, but nothing felt the same. My home was unrecognizable. The windows boarded up, the walls patched with bullet holes. The smell of gunpowder soaked deep into the wood. Outside, Marco's men were everywhere, guarding, patrolling, whispering into radios. But even with an army outside my door, I'd never felt more trapped. I watched Marco from the kitchen window as he spoke with one of his lieutenants. His calm scared me more than any explosion. He looked untouchable, unshakable, like the violence around him was just weather he'd learned to ignore. When he finally came inside, I didn't let him speak first. "I can't do this anymore, Marco." He set down his gloves, expression unreadable. "Do what?" "Live like this," I said. "With guards, guns, secrets. Every time a car passes by, I can't breathe. This isn't life, it's a sentence." He studied me, his gaze quiet but sharp. "You think I don't know that? Then stop it." I said, "You have power. End it. Let me go." He stepped closer. "If I let you go, you'll be dead before the next sunrise." "Maybe," I whispered, "but at least it would be my choice." For a long moment, he said nothing. The only sound was the rain starting again, soft, steady, almost gentle against the roof. Then he sighed, looking down. "You still don't understand, do you?" "Understand what?" "That there's no out," he said quietly. "Not for me. Not for anyone who touches my world." He turned away, pacing slowly, like he was arguing with himself. When I was 16, I tried to leave. I wanted to study medicine, to fix people, not break them. My father found out. He sent men after me, not to bring me back, to remind me who I was. I buried one of them myself. He looked at me again, his voice low and raw. "The day you saved me, you didn't just stop the bleeding. You gave me something I didn't think existed anymore, a choice. And now I have to make mine. I frowned. What choice? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a folded envelope from his coat and handed it to me. Inside is everything you'll need. A new ID, cash, a flight booked under another name. There's a car waiting 2 miles down the road. If you leave now, my men won't stop you. I froze. You're letting me go? His voice was calm, but there was a tremor beneath it. If you stay, you'll die for something you don't believe in. I won't let that happen. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. And what about you? He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. I still have debts to pay. Marco, they'll kill you. He shrugged slightly. Better me than you. I wanted to argue, but words failed me. All the anger, fear, and confusion of the last few weeks melted into something painfully human. The realization that the monster the world feared was somehow still capable of love in his own broken way. Outside, thunder rolled again. The men were moving. I could hear the distant hum of engines, the restless tension before another storm. Marco looked toward the window, then back at me. They're coming, he said softly. You need to go. I shook my head. Not without you. His jaw tightened. Don't make this harder, Elena. You saved me last night. Let me save you now. He gave a sad, quiet laugh. You already did. Then he handed me the keys. Cold metal, heavy with finality. When I stepped outside, the air was thick with fog. The men didn't look at me. They all knew. I made it halfway to the road before I heard it, the sound of engines approaching from the opposite direction. Not Marco's cars. Different ones. Before I could react, gunfire erupted. The men scattered, shouting orders. I turned back toward the house, just as Marco stepped onto the porch, gun drawn. His coat whipped in the wind as he shouted something to his men in Italian, his voice commanding, fearless. He saw me then, standing in the open, frozen. His eyes locked with mine, and he shook his head slowly, mouthing the words, "Go." But I couldn't move. I dropped behind the nearest car as bullets tore through the air. The world exploded into chaos, glass shattering, smoke rising, men shouting. Then, suddenly, silence. I peeked up from behind the car. The attackers were gone. Some of Marco's men were down. Others were dragging bodies away. And there, in the middle of the chaos, Marco stood, bleeding again, his gun slipping from his hand. Marco! I ran to him, catching him before he fell. He smiled weakly, blood staining his shirt where my stitches once were. Didn't I tell you, he said faintly, that kindness always has a price? Don't you dare, I whispered. Don't you dare die now. He brushed his thumb against my cheek, leaving a faint smear of red. You gave me peace for a moment. That's more than most ever do. Stop talking, I said, pressing my hand to his wound. You're going to be fine. You have to be. His breathing slowed. You can still go. The car's waiting. Don't waste it. I'm not leaving you, I said, choking back tears. He smiled, barely. That's what my sister said. And then, the light in his eyes dimmed. I stayed there, holding him, long after the gunfire faded, long after the engines disappeared into the mist. When his men finally approached, they didn't speak. One of them, Angelo, placed a hand on my shoulder. He bought your freedom, he said quietly. Don't let it go to waste. I looked down at the man who dragged me into his world, realizing that in some cruel twist of fate, the one person I should have feared most had become the only one who'd ever protected me completely. And in that moment, I understood. The line between villain and savior is thinner than anyone wants to admit. It's been 6 months since that night. 6 months since the gunfire faded, the smoke cleared, and the name Marco DeLuca vanished from every newspaper headline and police report. Officially, he died in a gang dispute somewhere along the southern border. But no body was ever found. No funeral. No closure. People like Marco don't get buried. They disappear. I moved to another city, changed my name, and reopened a small clinic under a new identity. The locals know me as Dr. Elena Marin, the quiet woman who helps the sick and never talks about her past. It's easier that way. The less I say, the safer I am. But sometimes, when the wind howls a certain way through the alley, or a car's headlights linger too long on my window, I still feel it, the weight of his world, reaching for me through the cracks of my new life. The nights are hardest. I close the clinic early, lock every door, and sit by the small lamp on my desk, pretending the hum of the refrigerator is just background noise, not the echo of an engine idling outside. Every day, I tell myself he's gone. And every night, I find a reason not to believe it. One rainy evening, I was closing up when a little boy ran into the clinic, clutching his arm. He'd fallen off his bike, scraped his elbow badly. His mother followed, breathless, apologizing for the intrusion. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks, and cleaned the wound carefully. When the boy looked up at me, he said, "You sound like someone my dad used to know." I paused, the words catching in my throat. "Oh, what do you mean?" He shrugged. He used to tell me stories about a lady who helped someone important, someone everyone was scared of. I froze, my hands trembling just slightly as I tied the bandage. "What was her name?" "I don't remember," he said. "He just said she was brave." I forced a smile and handed him a lollipop from the counter. "Then I hope she's somewhere safe." The boy grinned and left with his mother. I stood there long after they were gone, heart pounding. It was nothing, a coincidence. It had to be, but as I stepped outside to lock the door, I saw it. Across the street, half hidden in the rain, was a black car. Sleek, polished, engine running. My pulse spiked. I took a cautious step forward. The driver's window was tinted, impossible to see through, until it slowly rolled down. For a split second, lightning flashed across the sky and I saw him. Marco. Older, maybe. A faint scar along his cheek. But those same eyes, calm, steady, impossible to forget. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't angry either. He just watched me. I stood frozen in the rain, the sound of my heartbeat louder than the thunder. He lifted something, a small gold ring, and placed it on the dashboard, letting the headlights glint off its surface. The lion, the same one he'd left behind that night in my clinic. Tears blurred my vision. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask 1,000 questions. Why? How? Why come back? But before I could move, he gave a small nod. Then the car rolled backward, slow and smooth, until it disappeared into the mist. I ran after it, but by the time I reached the road, there was nothing but the faint trail of wet tire marks. The world was silent again. I stood there for a long time, rain soaking through my coat, the sound of my breath echoing in the empty street. Then I looked down. At my feet was a small, black envelope. My hand shook as I picked it up. Inside, written in that same firm handwriting I remembered from months ago, was a single line. You gave me life. Now live yours. No signature. Just those words. I pressed the note to my chest, tears spilling freely now. I didn't know whether to laugh, scream, or fall to my knees. Because in that moment, I realized two things. Marco DeLuca was alive, and somehow he was still watching over me. In the weeks that followed, strange things began happening. My rent was paid before I could transfer the money. My medical supplies, which I used to struggle to afford, were suddenly delivered in bulk, always anonymously. When I asked the supplier who sent them, they just said, "A friend of the clinic." I never asked again. Sometimes I wonder what his life looks like now, where he hides what ghosts haunt him. Maybe he's rebuilding his empire. Maybe he's running from it. Or maybe, for once, he's just free. As for me, I've stopped waiting for the sound of engines. I still wake up some nights, reaching for the black phone that's no longer there, expecting it to buzz with his voice on the other end. But then I remember his last words. You gave me life. Now live yours. So I do. I open my clinic every morning. I greet the children. I tend to the sick. I walk home when the sun sets, and sometimes, when I look across the street and see headlights glinting for just a moment, I let myself believe, maybe, somewhere out there, the man I saved is still keeping his promise. Because in his world, debts were eternal. But kindness was forever. And sometimes, that's the only kind of redemption people like us ever find. Clapperboard, thank you for watching Hidden Mafia Stories. If you were in her place that rainy night, would you have opened the door? Thought Balloon, comment your answer below. And don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic, true-life tales of mercy, danger, and redemption. Because sometimes, saving a life changes yours forever.